Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well and welcome to a new video. So today it's part 2 of my Raw Techno 3 Ableton template explanation. And yeah, last week we talked about the sound design and each track, the MIDI pattern and everything. And this week we're gonna talk a bit more about the arrangement, modulation, variation, and the mixing and the mastering. So if you haven't watched part 1, I put the link in the description, you can go and watch it. And yeah, just let's have a listen how the tracks sound. Alright, so that gives you an idea of the track. So in terms of the arrangement, main idea, usually when I do the live stream, I kind of improvise and I don't really have direction. I know more or less I wanted to do something hypnotic, but I didn't have any idea. Just by the feeling, I create something. So it can be something melodic, some is more percussive. It really depends. What's often happens is I will create several tracks in the session view. And then when I build something I like, I will build the arrangement in the session view. So you can see I kept the arrangement in the session view in the template. So this way you can understand a little bit more. This is obviously a rough arrangement, but it's just giving me a kind of guideline. And then what I usually do is I just press the scene and I record each scene until another rough arrangement. And then I kind of restructure. So it always changes obviously from the session mode, but yeah, that's how I usually do. For this track, actually, I had this synth at the beginning, but was not supposed to be the lead, but on the end I use it as the lead, as the main ID basically. Just I've done some modification in terms of the sound. I add a bit more. I had a second oscillator with some fold to add variation, and I duplicate after the track to add even make the sound a bit more wider. But yeah, the idea was to build something around this synth, and then usually what I will do is I will have a rough arrangement, but then I will start to automate the synth and make it evolve along the track, and then kind of the arrangement start to build around. I usually play a lot with the drum to see how to build things, but the main idea is to have the synth introduced progressively, like as is the intro, and then I will have like the chorus, so where you hear the main hook, the main lead playing, and then I will have a moment where you put it a little bit in the background, like to don't get too tired of it. So that's the verse part, and then I will bring it back as well for the last final energy and chorus. So that's the global arrangement idea. Now we're gonna go step by step and show you what I introduce and why. So I usually start with the groove. Obviously there is no drum, the synth is playing but the filter is very down so you barely hear it, and there is this ambience which kind of set the mood of the track, and so it starts like that. You have this ambience, you have the main zen but filter down, and then I will add some percussion. I have some SFX playing as well to help the transition, or like when I add a new element I will use this little SFX to introduce the element. Other things I like to do is to use a low-cut. You can see here I have an EQ8 which is acting like a low-cut, so really great to have this short low-cut, this short small break before to introduce a new element. Then I start to progressively add more drums. Again, same method, low-cut. Different type of SFX, add more drums. As the track goes, you're gonna see the filters start to open as well, so you introduce the synth. So it goes this way. I add more drums. I have this shaker sound. I have the ride, 909 ride coming. Filters keeps opening. So you can see that even if I still consider the intro, you have this whole part here, which is still almost we could consider it like a pre-chorus, or like it's already like very energetic and it's not really anymore the intro, but I still consider it like the intro. And then we enter into the break. So here again with the help of the SFX, I have different type of SFX. If you want to know how to make them, you can check last week's video. But yeah, it's just helping the track. And so then first we get rid of the kick and the low end and the tom, and then I will get rid of the drums. So I like to do this. If you get rid of everything straight away, like all the drums, all the bass like this, I found the transition to be a bit too abrupt. So what I will do is first get rid of the kick and bass, and then I will get rid of, not long time after, I will get rid of the hats. But obviously that's depend of the track, but yeah, and always using SFX to help the transition. And then here what I'm doing is I'm bringing down the filter of the send. So basically this part was something very energetic, and I want to bring something down. I want to calm things down, having things quieter. So this way I can build again tension, and then, you know, it's all about tension release and bringing this tension, and then after having the other drop with the chorus. So it goes like this. Very quiet a moment. I have a clap and snare roll coming. I have some noise here building the tension. Filter is opening. And then here right before I kind of stop everything, I tried different way to build tension, and like having the build up until the end or having a longer break. Nothing really work except this one. So it's like the pattern is playing like 2 times without any drums build up or SFX, just the pattern by itself just before to drop. And you can see that I bring down the filter as well. So it's playing very high, and then it's like kind of... So you can see that here it's very high, the filter, and then when it drop, it's like kind of very low. That was as well something I try. If I leave the filter fully open, it doesn't hit the same. It doesn't really work well, because obviously this part is very rich, very high energy. So having dropping with something a bit more lower, you know, obviously create contrast and dynamic, because you have something, the build-up, which is very high. Yeah, you just drop with something a bit quieter, it works well. Another thing I'm doing here, I have this send to this return, which is a washout effect. So basically I'm sending it. If I get rid of it, maybe you're gonna hear a difference, maybe more in this. You see how it's very quiet? Okay, and now with the return. So I use this return as it's like a washout effect. It's a rack from Make It Transition. It's just a very long reverb basically, and it's allowed me to send my whole mix into this return, and it's kind of create this noisy washout effect. And obviously it helps with tension because everything is going up, the volume is going up, the filter is going up, and everything is going into the return. So everything is going up as well into the return and into the reverb, which is create this long tail as well, which adds some energy, and it helps the transition because you have this long tail. It just kind of create a big washout of noise that helps the transition to go from something low to high and then go back to low. And so I've used it here as well. And later on the track, you have as well on top of that, it's another type of washout, but this one is with delay, with a high pass filter as well, which allowed you to kind of have this DJ effect. So here I abused it a little bit. I didn't want it to do that much for this track, but you get the idea. And yeah, then we drop with filter down, but full on ride, full on hats. Then I had some claps. See how the scents evolve along the track. I play a lot with the filter and the fold to add variation because it's a very simple short pattern, but having a lot of things evolving make it always interesting during the track. So the clap, then I will introduce this noisy ride, which is gonna add an extra energy to your track. With the low cut. So this part is a bit longer because it's kind of let's say the best part, because the ride is very, very energetic, very intense. And then here we're gonna go back into a kind of a small break, and we're gonna jump into the verse. So here again it's creating contrast. So we have, like I say, this long energetic moment. So you need to calm down things, and it's a great way to kind of get rid of all of the drum. And yeah, I have this short low cut as well, which is gonna help the transition. So just let's have a listen how we do. So here, same idea than for the first breakdown. You know, you create a dynamic and contrast by having something very energetic and then going straight into something way much lower. So that's why I bring down the cutoff as well of your main lead. The reason why as well is because it's the verse, and here's the moment of the track where you want to put your main lead a little bit in the background, just because if you listen to the same lead the whole track, you can get bored very, very quickly. And so doing that, you kind of put it a little bit in the background, so later on you can bring it back and it doesn't feel too boring. And on top of that, to add something fresh and new, I add this synth too, which sound like this. And it's just gonna add a bit of variation and something new to the table. Again, here you have some variation. One thing I like to do, I like to do sometimes with my hats arrangement, you know, because I usually have a lot of closed hat, open hats, right? I try to always never bring them in the same combination. What I mean is, like, for example, here I introduce first the 808, and then I bring the closed hat, and then I bring the open hat and the ride, and then the shaker. Then I get rid of everything. Then here I bring everything together, and then I bring the ride. Here I bring everything except the 909, and then I bring the 909, but I don't have the ride. And then here I drop exactly like on the first drop, but I'm come back to it later. But you see, I try to introduce drums in a different way to don't have always the same progression. Like, for example, I could do like always bringing first the closed hat, then the 808, then the 909, then the ride, again and again the whole track. Here I always try to change that so it adds variation, and you always feel like the drop is new or there is something new happening. So yeah, then I open the hat. So yeah, we had this little break from the main lead for 24 bar, and then I have a break to reintroduce it. So again, I will build the tension same way than in the first break, opening the filter, bringing the noise up, the clap snare as well as like a snare roll. And again, I kind of cut everything just before the drop. So just the main synth is just playing. So it's something like this. So here in the first part, I get rid of the synth 2 that I reintroduce later on, and I introduce the ride as well in the same time. And then I will introduce the clap, and so it's gonna go on for 16 bar. Obviously here again the synth modulate, the filter, the fold. Here the synth I play with the resonance to add this weird sweeping effect which evolve. I have as well this SFX coming here and there a bit, not randomly, but you know, it's not always the same pattern repeating, as you can see. So yeah, all of that add a bit of variation until the final break, where I will get rid first of the clap snare and the ride with the 909, and obviously I bring the filter down of the main lead because you need to start to get rid of everything. So yeah, that's how we bring everything down a little. then the outro, we just have less drum. I get rid of some of the drums, and you just have the main synth lead, which is the filter is gonna go down slowly, start to slowly get rid of the drum one by one. You see, but first we get rid of the shaker, but then now after it's gonna be the 808 here, and then close the hat, bring everything down to kind of having something like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the arrangement. It's pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about automation variation. I show you a little bit already some of them. So this is always super important, especially for this kind of track, to where you have a simple pattern to add a lot of variation. So yeah, here I play with the synth, with the filter just so to open to make the sound brighter, but you have as well this macro here, which is mapped to the fold, which is created this folding effect, which is kind of pitching up a little. So it allows you to change the timbre of your sound, but without really you can see I can modulate it. You can hear there is something changing. You cannot really exactly nail what is changing, but the tone is literally changing. And so that's great to add variation and to modulate, and along with the filter as well. And yeah, that's pretty much for the synth. Here I've just sent into the return for the washout effect as well for this part. That was for helped the transition with the verse, because obviously this part are very rich part into something which is very low, very quiet. So yeah, you needed this to help the transition. And yeah, I have the send to where I modulate the resonance. So sometimes you will have more like a, the resonance is helped with this weird sweeping effect. So now you have here you have a normal sweeping, and here you're gonna have a very much more resonant effect. For example, like that. One thing as well, if you check last week's video, I've used this track as well, which is gonna add some slow variation, some slow movement. You have some flanger, some chorus, some dub delay as well, which is like a filter delay, and the filter is modulated by the LFO. So all of that is kind of creating movement. I will put the link in the description if you want to find out more about this track, but I've talked about it last week. I used it there, and I use it as well on the second layer of the send to. So again, some dub delay, flanger, and the stereo amount here is a chorus. And yeah, that's pretty much then. After, like, here's just some volume automation. To be fair, on this one, I've done less automation than I will usually do. So here's just the send to the return. So that's create the washout effect like I've shown you before. And here are all the low-cut. Obviously, that's what I use to create breaks and like short breaks before to introduce something. It's always great to have, like, before you're gonna add a new send on your hat, like the 2 or 4 or 8 bar before, you just put a low-cut. It's just work well. It's just create this mini break. So yeah, then after I've done some small variation, for example, with the closer hat, where I have like some kind of this kind of rolling, rattling effect. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the variation and automation. Now let's talk about mixing. So if you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say. I usually mix more or less as I produce. So I always try to first make sure every time I pick up a sample or a preset or a sound, or I create a sound, it sounds great. It's a very good sample or very good sound. Make sure that every time I add a new sound or sample, it's fitting the track perfectly. So this is something very important, because sometimes you just say, okay, I'm gonna pick these hats, and actually this hat doesn't fit the track, and kind of make the whole track a little bit feel off. Make sure that each track I choose has the purpose, and then my mix, you're gonna see there is not that much. It most of the time is like sound design purpose, but for example for the kick, but the drum bass is more like, this is more sound design, like just making it a bit more punchy and beefy. And then I have this kick punch rack, which is just gonna add a bit of brightness to have the kick cut through the mix. Here just have some sidechain, EQ, reverb, and yeah, bass in mono under 120 Hz. And then it's gonna be mainly saturation that I will use to add some extra harmonics, just having things a bit more louder. Then I will usually sometimes add a bit of delay if I need to add groove, a bit of reverb to put your sound in the space. But most of these effects are like kind of more sound design effect than mixing. You know, it's more like to give a color or to give a feeling than really like to say, okay, I need to make things, all the tracks work well together. That I will try to do it, like I said, by picking up the right sample and making sure they fit all well together. And then I do often this trick with my hats, with the drum bus. Basically, I use drive and crunch to just make things a bit louder, brighter. Crunch is great for that. Like I said last week, the problem with crunch is that sometimes your sound become a bit too aggressive, so you can damp it. That is really nice. But one thing I like to use is transient, especially with the hats. What's happening with the hats when it goes into reverb, especially hats that are very noisy, it creates this noisy long tail because of the reverb. And transient is a great way to kind of reduce this tail and make you sound a bit more sharp and less noisy. So obviously this is something to do if you want like have a kind of a clean surgical sound. If you want something more analog, let's say noisy, obviously leave it as it is, and because noise is gonna be your friend in this case. So then after EQ as well, sorry I forgot to say, but EQ, I never really do that much surgical EQ. Just look at sometimes, or boosting frequency that I need to be boosted just to have the sound cut through the mix. But yeah, this is sound design related. Amps was to make the hats, the shaker, like very noisy. Like to really get something gritty. Shifter is to pitch down. Redux is again to add some noise and make things a bit more grittier. And then filter delays to add movement. You see like this ping pong with the hats is kind of creating this groove, which is very nice. And then reverb to put into a mix. Same drums burst trick, that's what I just explained. And then overdrive is really to add like, it's a filter distortion to really add this nice crispiness on top. Make it a little bit more clear, surgical, brighter. Yeah, perfect. And yeah, and then I always do the same. So here is a stereo hash effect, which is it's a delay I use as a hash effect. Some sidechain compression, obviously, to have this bumping effect or to let the kick a little bit cut through the mix. And then high pass just to keep the frequency I really need. Reverb. Then about reverb, I usually kind of have three types of reverb. I will have like what I would say like a room reverb that I would usually use for the drums, which is like a very short decay, not too much wet amount. And yeah, it's just to get your drum less dry. You don't want them in the long reverb. Then I will have a reverb which is a bit longer that I would usually use for my lead. Around, you see here's more around 4 seconds rather than for the drums. It's more usually about 1 second. Around that, even sometimes shorter. Then the third type of reverb I will have is more like ambience reverb, which I use like for ambience and for putting things in the background, for SFX as well, where you have decay more like 16 seconds, usually a higher dry wet, and I do the same for the SFX as well. You can see very long decay, long dry wet amount. So this is the three, let's say, type of reverb. Then obviously you kind of adjust the way you want. Sometimes I will use long reverb with the hats if I want this noisy hats ambience. Sometimes I will keep them short and sharp. It's really depends, obviously. Same with the send. Sometimes you will have a send in the big room. The problem with long reverb is the more you put long reverb, the more you're gonna have reverb with long tail. The more you're gonna have long tail, the more they're gonna overlap each other, and the more it's gonna create a big huge mess. Yeah, being careful with the decay of your reverb, it's important. I can show you, you can see there is no crazy EQ or compression. You see, I never use compression except for sidechain. Again, I always EQ or compress if I need to. If I feel I don't need, I don't do it. I'm not just gonna EQ because of the sake of it. This is something important as well that I used to make a big mistake. I used to make an EQ compressor on every single track and trying to get rid boost of frequency in some track, but sometimes, you know, you just leave it as it is if it sounds good. And yeah, and then once everything is leveled properly, you usually get a nice mixdown. All right, if you want to quickly talk about this sec mixdown, I put the link in the description if you want in detail exactly why I have that many sub mixdown, the master and the return. But in a nutshell, especially when I do track for educational purpose, I like to keep on the master just the mastering effect chain. And so I just put that, but I like as well to have some effects which are like sound design effect, but related to the whole arrangement. So for example, the low cut, I have the riser effect. You see, you remember where you could like do this kind of DJ effect. So this kind of effect, I don't want to put them on the master, because after everything is together, the sound design, master effect, and the master effect related to the mastering, they are together. And it's how to know which effect does what and which effect is for which purpose. So that's why I will create a Mixodown with, here are my sound design, arrangements, effect, and here's just my mastering chain on the master. And then why I create a sub Mixodown, it's because I like as well to send my whole mix to a return for a washout effect. So like this, I can create this long tail effect like I was mentioning. And in order to do that, if I was just using a Mixodown, obviously you're gonna send the Mixodown into your return, and then the return is gonna go back onto your Mixodown because you want your return to be affected by the low cut and the riser effect. But if you do that, you're gonna have a feedback loop, because you're basically sending something to this, which is going back into this, which is going back into that. So in order to do that, you create a sub Mixodown where you have your whole mix, plus you send to the return. The return is going into the Mixodown. The sub Mixodown is going into the Mixodown, so it doesn't create any feedback loop. And then both the return and your sub Mixodown are affected by the low cut, the riser effect, and any volume motor automation or any master sound design effect. And then everything goes into the master where you have your mastering chain. And speaking of mastering, so this is what I call a homemade mastering. I will start with the utility, making sure everything around 120 Hz it's in mono. Obviously the sub bass in the club, in festival, the subwoofer, everything they are like in mono. So you make sure you have this in mono just to avoid bad surprise. Adding a bit of width, but this is the utility width. It's not like a super stereo effect, but it's just add a little bit, so I leave it. Then I will use glue compression to kind of compact a little bit everything, make things a bit louder as well. A bit more in your face. So here important is to EQ the incoming signal, which is gonna trigger your compressor, because what will happen if it's your kick and your low end is usually them which have the higher energy. So there's gonna be the one who's gonna trigger your compressor, and you don't want that. You want a kind of overall nice compression. So having the EQ kind of cut them from the trigger, so they are still affected by the compressor, but they are not the ones which are triggering the compressor. And so then you are really go with a slow attack. Really, it really depends. Depends if you want something a bit more pumping or not. That's really depend of the track. Here I left it there. I will usually left the ratio at 4 because it's kind of like a middle average good. And then I will bring down the threshold until I have something I liked. I don't want too much compression. I rarely go above 5 on the master, but then it's up to you. And then you can compensate with the makeup gain. So what is cool, you can have as well activate the soft clip. So if you push up on the makeup gain, it's kind of start to soft clipping, so which is gonna add some nice extra harmonics. So this is if you really want like a very loud. You see, you can get that loud without clipping or distortions, but I will keep it like this for now. So then the EQ kind of to rebalance a little bit the mix, to cut everything under 30 Hz as well. I usually remove around, it depends between 200 or 40 in that range. Usually there is, depend of the track obviously, but there is something unpleasant, which kind of makes track unclear. I always feel like when I cut here, you lose a bit of punch, let's say, but you gain a little bit in clarity. It's like your low end is less muddy, and so it's kind of a compromise you have to make, but yeah. And then I will boost like usually at 1 kilo, around 3, 5, or like I said, this is like homemade mastering. It's like usually the frequency I like to boost because it adds clarity. Obviously, this depends of the track, can vary a little bit. And then just a look at 16 kilohertz to get rid of all of the unnecessary noisiness above that. Then a saturator, just to add extra harmonics, makes things louder, you gain in perceived loudness. And speaking of perceived loudness, I will use as well the color limiter. This is a Max for Live device, which is available in the Creative Extension pack, I think. Here it's a free pack you can download. And you have the saturation and color, which allows you to add some nice well, it gets louder here, but yeah, it's always out a bit of warm. And yeah, here's as well limiting a little bit. And then you have a double limiter, which is just to make things louder. Here's basically squashing a little bit everything. So I usually use 2 rather than 1. It's just like to having like 2 stages, kind of a little bit softer than having just one with 4 dB of gain. And then making sure you're setting it at -0.3. And yeah, and that's pretty much. So I could have gained a bit of loudness by cranking up a little bit more the makeup gain, but I think it's already loud enough. And yeah, that's get you kind of a loud master that doesn't feel weak compared to other master track that you might play it with along with your track during your DJ set or whatever. All right, so I hope you learned a few tricks here and there. Thank you very much for watching, this guy. If you want to grab the template, it's a great way to support me. I will put the link in the description. And see you next time, guys, for a new video. Bye. Thank you for watching.